It was an awakening of industrial militancy in the UK.
These men are going to oppose it, and they will quite rightly stand here at 6 o'clock in the morning, rain, wind or shine.
Employers are using the challenging external environment to reassess what their business strategies are, and some employers are using it as a bit of an excuse.
Tens of thousands of electricians on the streets, a wave of defiance, occupations and confrontation that forced some of the country's biggest employers to think again, and which tore up the rules about how unions can campaign and win.
Shows you the power of what workers can do if we lift our little finger.
You can stick your fucking BESNA! Shove your fucking BESNA!
This is the story of how a determined group of activists took on 8 road construction companies that wanted to cut their pay and rewrite how the industry was governed. For 6 months, tens of thousands of workers came together in a campaign which left the bosses' plans in tatters and put the electricians in the driving seat instead. I'm John Millington, and I reported from the dawn pickets at oil refineries, rail construction sites, power stations and city streets which were the industrial battleground for what became known simply as the Sparks dispute. This is where it all began, when rank and file Sparks held their first meeting back in August 2011, within shouting distance of the Unite headquarters. Union full-timers said it would take months to build a campaign against the 8 major companies, who were threatening to cut wages by 35%. The Sparks faced a stark choice, either sign up or face the sack. Militant voices said there was already an army of activists itching to start, even though the reception at some workplaces ranged from sceptical to downright hostile. The deadline for the new contracts was only months away, in early December, and the campaign organisers believed it was a race against time to build their networks inside the key workplaces.
Mainly it was through text messaging. The way the industry works, where you move about, you know, your average electrician's probably got 40, 50 contacts in his mobile of various people he's worked out in the site. So it was just like done by spreading text messages about mainly, and an email contact list that was put round on that first meeting. The nature of the dispute and the viciousness of the attacks by these companies really galvanised people behind it. You know, these people were, when you're fighting a 35% pay cut, you know, it does tend to get you motivated to want to fight back against it.
For people looking at how the movement is changing and how unions are organising what academics call precarious workers, this dispute has raised some important questions.
I think it started as a fairly traditional industrial dispute, and certainly the issues involved are really kind of bread and butter issues and the core issues of the labour movement, as the labour movement has existed for decades. But I think it's become something much more interesting because it's shown that it's perfectly possible not just to organise this group of workers, but it's very precarious workers, but mobilise them and achieve something and challenge some of the law and get the law clarified, which I think is also quite important. And definitely there has been a process of broader politicisation of those groups of those workers.
But that broader politicisation also caused tension within the Unite leadership over how to beat the construction industry employers.
They believe that because the recession has hit, that people are fearful of their jobs. They believe that this is the right time to attack us because they think we are weak. Well, we're going to prove to them that they've made a huge mistake in that particular analysis.
Unite called a strike ballot, but immediately faced a challenge from the lead employer, Balfour Beatty. In the depths of winter, as the protest continued, with a dispute on a legal knife edge, the employers ramped up their legal threats to Unite.
I'm very glad that the union's taking up this case, because often with these issues the only way of resolving them is a strong union. Individually it's more or less impossible to get the employer to behave properly, but all power to Unite's elbow. I mean, if the union can take this on as a collective issue, using industrial action if necessary, then that may push the employer back into behaving properly.
This dispute will be won. It will be won by Unite. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. They think they can cut wages by a third in this day and age, just like that. Absolute disgrace.
As the dispute entered its 4th month, both sides became entrenched for a long battle. The basic issues were becoming clearer, and in London the activists won welcome new support from the Occupy movement. However, the confrontation was deepening, even as the temperatures were dropping and the strike ballot began.
Unfortunately, Balfour Beatty tried to put an injunction against it, and Unite actually bottled it before it actually went to the High Court, which I think was a big mistake, and that sort of dented the confidence. But also there was a bit of confusion about what we should actually do about the contracts. Unite from the beginning said don't sign them, and then come Christmas they turned around and changed their position and said you must sign the contracts but put a letter of complaint in against it saying you're signing it under duress, and that caused a bit of confusion. And then they said they was going to reballot before Christmas, and then it was a reballot in the new year, and then the reballot ended up towards the end of January. We lost the momentum slightly on the protests.
The Unite leadership may have felt this was shaky ground legally, but the protests continued and increasingly reflected the Sparks' anger at a virtual blackout of coverage in the mainstream media. For many years, construction companies had exploited fear of dismissal, state surveillance and the notorious anti-union blacklist as a way of forcing a kind of industrial peace in the sector.
I know a few people, they have been blacklisted, there's no doubt about it. It's a can of worms that needs opening up and exploring.
Uprooting the blacklist remains one of the most urgent items of unfinished business for the Sparks. In the aftermath of the BESNA dispute, the can of worms is finally being prized open.
The thing, more than anything else, that has put the blacklisting centre stage is the electricians' BESNA dispute. On thousands of placards and tens of thousands of leaflets produced by the union and produced by the rank and file workers going into building sites up and down the country, it's been saying end the blacklist, stop the blacklist. And now for the first time ever in the construction industry national negotiations, blacklisting is an item on the agenda. It's a massive step forward, and it shows the difference between just relying on the courts and relying on rank and file action to actually get things done.
And that presents a challenge to the wider industry too. Not just clearing the blacklist, but changing old styles of working and recruitment, which mean even this, the biggest building sites in the world at the moment, remain virtually closed off to women and ethnic minority apprentices from around East London.
Construction tends to be 97% white male dominated, even though there might be about 7% of BAMEs or ethnic minorities that's doing a construction related course. In England, only about 3% actually move into the industry. When I started to drill down to find out, well, okay, there's over 100 of people that might have worked in construction, drill it down, okay, how many worked in the Olympic site? There was about 25. Drill it down, okay, how many of those came from the host boroughs? About 3. One of them was BAME, no female. So targets are fine, somewhat, but then you have to get behind those figures and find out exactly what's going on.
The breakthrough for the Sparks finally came in February, here, as Balfour Beatty lost their legal challenge to Unite's second strike ballot, and the rank and file campaign moved to an even more public confrontation with the BESNA companies. They also secured the support of one of the world's largest trade unions, the Teamsters.
Unions have obviously been chasing that agenda and finding it very challenging, and we're only just starting to see opportunities to then say, okay, well, there are in some sectors opportunities to organise across workplaces, and we need to do that if we're going to have any hope of setting standards that are enforceable. Because if we have just one bit of unionised workforce over here, we're always going to be undercut by the non-unionised workforce in the rest of the sector.
And that is the new challenge for the rank and file. Yet more unfinished business.
We think that what's been happening in the industry is enough's enough. After the victory over the BESNA, where we could see that lots of things were wrong in the industry, and one of the problems that we have today is the amount of agency workers. People are not getting direct labour. Now, this is not an anti-agency worker, because many of the guys here have had to work for agencies, but they know what happens in the agencies.
By February, the Sparks had come a long way from the first days of the Dawn protests, the confrontations with the police, and the waves of site occupations and unofficial walkouts. When the increasingly militant civil disobedience visited the hyper-rich streets of London and an official dinner of industry executives, it was clear that the drama was in its last act.
We're showing bloody civil disobedience!
In Australia, the United States, construction workers are in solidarity with their struggle.
He was very vocal at them as they walked past our 9-foot inflatable rat. And for the first time, the actual chief executives of these companies see exactly that we wasn't going to go away and we was going to keep going for them until we won.
Skill jobs! Skill jobs!
That victory proved to be an inspiration to trade unionists well beyond the construction industry. The movement that began here used social media and independent organisation to help build the protests. In a sector that has been hit harder than most by the recession and coalition austerity, the BESNA dispute has shown that it is possible to organise, to fight and to win if the political will is there.
The BESNA dispute with the electricians has been the absolute, steamroller in effect that we want. Bar anything else, sending out press releases is one thing, winning an employment tribunal is another thing, but something in a completely different league of its own is thousands of workers actually demanding the end of the blacklist and actually taking industrial action in order to get there.
I think the biggest thing to learn from the dispute is you should always work with your union for as long as they do what you want them to do. If you turn around and ask them to do something, they don't do it, then you should just start acting independently of them and organising amongst yourselves. David Cameron a few weeks ago, he said that the biggest force for social change in this country is the business. Well, it's not. It's the working class is the biggest force for social change. And when we stand together and fight together, we can actually beat anyone.